There was a kid that went missing in my neighborhood growing up, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part is what we found out later. So when I was growing up, there was a boy, his name was Ethan, and he lived 3 houses down from me. He was always on his BMX bike riding around, and he was calmly like outside until the streetlights came on. I don't know how often his parents really saw him. He was always just outside. He was 11 years old at the time, and on one Friday afternoon, he actually went missing. They did find his bike. It was behind a baseball field that I would say was probably like half a mile from my house. I remember there was a lot of search parties, and it went on for quite a while. Like, neighbors would volunteer, the police officers searched for a while. We even had like helicopters at one point looking for Ethan. Nobody ever found like any trace of him. It's really, really sad, but people did stop talking about it and they stopped searching for it. The family actually eventually moved away, which I don't blame them. They probably just had too many memories there. Fast forward 15 years later, I went back home to help my parents clean out their garage for them as they were like moving out. So I had lived away from home for like 3 years at the time, and I went back. One of those days I decided just to go walk the town like one last time, right? Because I didn't have any need to come back to it. And I went over to the baseball field and I was just, looking at everything, taking it all in. It was a lot smaller than I remember it being. It was definitely old and withering away, I guess you could say. Behind the field was an old maintenance building. It had been locked up for as long as I can remember. But this time when I walked over to it, the door was actually hanging open. And that was weird because it was always locked, but I figured that the city was probably just tearing it down. It was probably about time. I got nosy, I went in. It was just old lawnmowers, sprinklers, shelves with like lots of dust, right? I was stepping out to leave and I noticed that there were actually fresh footprints going into it, and they were not my footprints, they were somebody else's footprints. Like somebody had been in there recently, I'm sure, just to tear it down. And so I was looking at the floor and I started to notice that there was one square of concrete that looked different than the rest. As I looked closer, I noticed that it had like a very old, rusty like ring on it. And if you gave it a little pull, it actually lifted, and I realized this wasn't concrete at all. You lift it up enough and you see that it's actually a wooden hatch, and it had like the thinnest layer of concrete on it. After you lifted it up, there was a staircase that actually led underground. And I'll never forget the smell. The smell was very damp, like it had been closed for a minute, it seems like. And I went down the first step, obviously so scary. I was nosy. I went down the first step, second step, I had my flashlight on, and then I caught something on the wall. And it looked like marks, it was like marks that you see in a movie of people like counting days, like of how long they've been trapped there. I got freaked out. I left and I called the police. Police came, they searched the tunnel that night. The next day, actually, on the news, they talked about how there was evidence that this tunnel has been used in the past. And it didn't say like what kind of evidence, but it also didn't say anything to do with Ethan. But that's not the weirdest part. Get this, a few weeks later, I actually bumped into one of the retired officers that worked on missing cases decades earlier. And I asked him if he knew about the tunnel or if he found out like what the tunnel was for. And he said, no, we knew about it back in the day. I'm like, you knew it was like a room, like it had a staircase? And he's like, yes, we did know that it was a room and potential things could have been happening under there. However, when we did go and search it for missing person cases, it was always empty. I asked him if he thought that somebody ever used it like later on after it was hidden, and he asked me a question back. He said, was there a light bulb on the string coming down from the ceiling? And I said yes, and he just kind of stared at me and he was like, that's a little weird because the electricity actually stopped working 2 years before Ethan even went missing. So I'm not sure who's replacing that light bulb all these years.